to do the burial, and so I'm kind of completing what I was supposed to be doing last night. That's one of the reasons. Secondly, the Hespedim, a lot of them were in Hebrew, which was difficult for our Talmidim to comprehend. And also, it was a lot of crowding, a lot of standing. It wasn't such an easy atmosphere for people to appreciate what was being said. So I also thought that that would be a good thing for us to, in a more relaxed setting, in a more, everyone sitting and being able to pay attention to what's being said, I thought that would be a good opportunity. Thirdly, I think that I would like it to be a message for our Talmidim, that how we can keep that legacy going of this great person that passed away. How can we emulate his legacy, his message, his way of life? I also thought that that would be very important for us to carry on his great work. And lastly, we have the whole idea, it's a very strange thing. We are in the midst of this whole mourning period, and we have Purim. Like, how do the two things fit together? How do we, celebrate on Purim, fresh after the loss of our great leader? So in terms of just practically, all of the Purim activities that were planned for Thursday night will continue. The Shiva, in all practical purposes, really ends on Thursday night, even though they could sit Shiva after Purim's over, but once Purim's over, they finish the Shiva. So for all practical purposes, the Shiva really finishes on Thursday night, and so all of our activities, all the programs that are planning activities will continue. And then the Yeshiva will have its Purim Mesiba on Motzi Shabbos. So it's very interesting, when I was sitting Shiva for my mother, I remember the Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal, he came to Menachem Oval, he came to comfort me in my home, and it was very interesting. We had a similar kind of situation. We were preparing for my son's wedding. It was the week of the preparations of his wedding, and in the middle of the Shiva, we made an ufruf for my son. And I remember, feeling it was such a strange thing. We're preparing a simcha. My son's ready to go under the chuppah. The day after I got up from Shiva was the chasna. And so the Rosh Yeshiva, in his normal way, he said, Rav Shlomo, you have to learn how to live with steeras. You have to learn how to live with contradictions. We have, on the one hand, we have the loss of our Rosh Yeshiva, which is a devastating event for all of us. On the other hand, we have Purim. And we have to celebrate Purim in the full sense. It's one of the most joyous days of the year. So we have to learn how to live with steeras. We have both things happening at the same time, and that's Jewish life. Jewish life is that sometimes we have steeras. Sometimes we have contradictions that we have to live with. Many of the Talmidim, current Talmidim, did not know the Rosh Yeshiva or did not benefit from his Torah directly. The last 3 years he wasn't well. But I would like to say from all of you, you are benefiting from his Torah. Because all of us, we're his Talmidim. And we're giving over his Torah. And you can have a physical father. You can have a father that brought you into this world, as we saw from the Schiller family last night. You can have a spiritual father that teaches you about life, that teaches you about Torah, that teaches you a derech. And he was a spiritual father for all of us. We're giving over what he taught us. We're giving over his mahalach in life that he taught us. And so you are benefiting. And it's not that we lost the Rebbe, you lost the Rebbe. Because through us, you're receiving his mahalach, his approach, his Torah, what he gave to the world. And so it's a loss for all of us. We're all Yisayim. It's not just those who had the benefit of learning from him directly and spending so much time with him, but all of you indirectly, you're also getting it from all of us. So many of us are his Talmidim. So many of us have absorbed his message. So many of us have learned in this great yeshiva. And so you indirectly, you've learned from him. You've learned tremendous things from him. And we'll try to see if we can capitalize some of those things that this yeshiva stands for, and which is so much in his image, and so much in the image of Rav Mendel, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha. One thing that's clear, that's Ohr Somayach, that represents Rav Schiller, Zechatzal Levracha, and his partner for so many years, Rav Mendel Zechatzal Levracha, is that the goal of Ohr Somayach is to become, and I hate using these terms, but it's exactly what they would say, a regular guy. A regular guy. A regular frum person. So what does that mean? What does that mean to be a regular guy? That means you can fit into any frum community anywhere in the world. Whether it's Ramat Beit Shemesh here in Eretz Yisrael, where so many of our Talmidim live, whether it's in Passaic, whether it's in Edison, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's in Johannesburg, whether it's in Melbourne, whether it's in London, you are a regular member of the frum, Toronto, you're a regular member of the frum community. Yeah? You fit in. Not only do you fit in, you thrive in a frum community. You know how to learn, people respect you, and we see that in our Talmidim. All over the world, wherever they are. They not only fit in, they're leaders. They're leaders. And when a person feels that he fits in, the Yiddishkeit will last. It'll last in his children. It'll last in his grandchildren. And that's a unique contribution that our great Rosh Yeshiva Zechatzal Levracha made, that the goal is not just to be, okay, a nice frum guy, and, puts on tzitzis, and he keeps Shabbos, and he eats kosher food. The question is that going to last? Is that going to last by him? Is that going to last in his children? Is that going to last in his grandchildren? If there's no connection to Torah, a deep connection to Torah, it doesn't last. It fades away. And so the goal of this yeshiva always was, can you learn? Can you take a Gemara by yourself with Rishonim? Can you open a Shulchan Aruch by yourself? If your wife has a shaila, can you look it up for her? If your children have to learn Gemara with you, can you learn with them without your art scroll? That was always the goal of the yeshiva. And that's why, if you look at the Talmidim of this yeshiva, if you look at what we produced over the years, that's why it lasts. That's why it's sustainable. And you go in any community, you walk in any community all over the world, and there's some kind of night koilel going on of balabatim. And who's sitting there? Ohr Somayach guys. They're sitting there learning, they're sitting there steiging away, they're using every spare second they have to grow. That was the message of the Rosh Yeshiva. That's what he tried to achieve, not just making people Shomer Shabbos, not just that people should keep kosher, put a yarmulke on. He had a much bigger vision for all of us to become B'nai Torah, to become learned, and to pass it on to the next generation. And he felt that if you really want to have a kesher with the Rabbeinu Shalom, you want to have a kesher with Hashem Yisborach, the kesher is through Torah. The kesher is through learning Torah. The kesher is through being immersed in Torah. And if you want to have a kesher with Yiddishkeit, with mitzvahs, it also comes from Limud Torah. And that was the unique contribution that he made and that this yeshiva's made, which is in his image. And that gives us a lot of responsibility. How did he do it? How did he bring down that message that everything is all about learning and achieving and becoming something and becoming a Ben Torah? So one was by example. I mean, all of us know, whoever went into his office, he didn't come in for a schmooze. That wasn't it. How you doing, Rav Shlomo? Yeah? No, that wasn't. Right away, Divrei Torah. Right away. Boom, boom, boom. One after another. Another chiddush, another chiddush, another chiddush. Because that's what life was. Life is Torah. And so by example, Rav Mendel Zatzal, a Baki in Shas, a Baki in Shulchan Aruch, they set an example that this is what being a frum Jew is all about, being connected to Torah. There's another dimension as well, that they brought in the greatest sages in the English-speaking world. Rav Schiller worked at it. He put effort into it to assemble the greatest staff of Rabbanim that was possible. Rav Bulman Zechatzal Levracha, Rav Feldman Shlita, Rav Moshe Shapira Zechatzal Levracha, Rav Dov Schwartzman, Gedolei Olam. I don't want to embarrass the Rav here, Rav Asher Weiss, wherever there's talent out there, the Rosh Yeshiva would go, and he would track them down. Because why? To show the Talmidim, this is what life's about. Learning, reaching your potential, doing the best you can with your abilities to be the biggest Talmid Chacham you can. What's the message? So that was a nice part, talking about the Rosh Yeshiva. What's the message? The message is, he expects that of you. And he expects you to get to that point. And however long it takes, you may think you're in yeshiva for 3 weeks. Well, maybe you're wrong, right? According to the Rosh Yeshiva, if you cannot open a Mishnah Berurah by yourself, if you cannot open a Gemara by yourself with Rishonim and Achronim, then maybe somehow we've let the Rebbeinu Shalom down. We have to get to that point, and maybe you have to make some new plans, how I can get back to yeshiva, how I can stay longer. But to get to a point that you can also be a regular guy thriving in a frum community, and that way you'll last, and that way your children will last, and your grandchildren will last. And, it's an interesting thing. I mean, again, before I took on this new tafkid here, in the center program we had, I'd say 1,000 graduates. So we had 4 that had trouble in Yiddishkeit. 4. And out of the kids who was on touch with many of the children, maybe 5, 6, that's it. If you get connected to Torah, it's going to last. If you get connected to the Torah, you're connected in a real way, then it's going to last. Another point, speaking about the Rosh Yeshiva, is we have an interesting story in the Chumash. We have a shidduch. The shidduch, Avram Avinu, looks for a shidduch for Yitzchak. It's the longest, one of the longest narratives in the Chumash. Avram Avinu sends out his servant Eliezer to find a shidduch for his son. And he has 2 things he says to him. He says to Eliezer, he says, 1, I don't want any Canaanite girls. And that's a deep thing, because even the children of Lavan, the children of Besuel were also of the Avodah Zarah. The Kli Yakar talks about that, why the children of Besuel were better than the Canaanite girls. But he sends him out to find a shidduch, and he gives him 2 commandments. One was, no Canaanite girls, even though those are the girls who were there. Those are locals. No Canaanite women. Secondly, he says, not only no Canaanite women, you have to go to Chutz La'aretz to find a girl, bring her here. Bring her over here. Now look at the odds of that. I mean, that's like, 1, Dafka Chutz La'aretz girl, Dafka to bring her here, because he was afraid that if Yitzchak went there, that he would be in a bad environment, and he had to be close to home, he had to be close to his father. So look at the odds of pulling off a shidduch like that. Practically nothing. Go to Chutz La'aretz, Dafka Chutz La'aretz, bring that girl and bring her back. And he stuck to it, and that's exactly what he got. He got Rivki Meinu. So what do you see from this? When you have a goal in life, even when it looks impossible, even when it looks like you can't possibly get the job done, if it's the right thing, you stick with it. If it's right, and Avram Avinu was 100% convinced that a girl from Chutz La'aretz coming to Eretz Yisrael was the right combination for his son, and he stuck to his principles, and the Rebbeinu Shalom helped him. And he got the job done. And he was able to find a shidduch, and that built Klal Yisrael. Rivki Meinu was one of the mothers that built Klal Yisrael. When you see something in front of you that looks impossible, if you're dedicated and you stick to the goal, it's achievable. So, as the Rav spoke out last night, this whole kiruv thing, we take it for granted. There's so many Bali Tshuva, right? We take it for granted that this is like, okay, that's life. Somebody told me, and I assume he saw it in writing, 30% of the Torah community in Eretz Yisrael is either Bali Tshuva or children of Bali Tshuva. So we assume, okay, so Bali Tshuva, that's, But someone had to start this. Someone had to get it going. So the Rosh Yeshiva, Seichet Tzaddik Livracha, and Rav Weinbach, Zechariah Levracha, they took it on. They took it on, and when they went around telling people that this is what they want to do, people said, what, are you out of your mind? There was only one thing in Klal Yisrael at that point, downhill. People were leaving the fold. People were intermarrying. People were dropping out. They're going to come back? They're going to come back to Torah? Impossible. Not shaykh. And so, to the one great Rav who encouraged, was really Yeshivat Ohr Somayach, encouraged them. But everywhere they went, people thought it was crazy. People are going to become frum again? It looked impossible. And people said it's impossible. They had a vision, and they stuck to the vision. And because they stuck to the vision, look what they've built. Look what's been built here. Tens of thousands of families. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. We're already holding now by 4 generations of what this yeshiva has built. B'nai Torah, people following in the footsteps of their Rosh Yeshiva. People keeping mitzvahs, people learning Torah. Wherever, any community, you go anywhere, you're going to find Ohr Somayach graduates. Because it looked impossible, but they stayed with it. They stayed with a goal, and Baruch Hashem, they were matzliach. On a certain level, the message for us, a certain level, you're also taking on something which looks impossible. I don't want to scare anybody. Yeah? But first of all, learning Gemara. Yeah, the Gemara's not easy, right? Hebrew you have to learn, Aramaic you have to learn, there's no punctuation. The syntax is very complex. To become fluent, it looks like a mountain that you can't climb. It looks impossible. It looks like something we can't do. Secondly, then you got to raise a frum family, right? And you have no Masorah. You're trying to raise these kids, these Torah kids. You never went to Cheder. You never went to. Your wife may not have gone to Beis Yaakov. She may have, increasingly. More of our guys are marrying girls from Beis Yaakov. So you're trying to do something that looks impossible. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה b'ro'o. So what you're taking on also looks to be something insurmountable. But if you stick to your principles and you try to follow in the Masorah of what you have here in Yeshiva, you'll also be successful. You'll raise beautiful kinder. You can become a Talmid Chacham. And just because you had a late start, as the Rosh Yeshiva was always fond of saying, better late than never. We come a little late to this yeshiva, but we make it, and we become successful, and we raise beautiful children, even though it looks insurmountable. Avram Avinu, when he had to make that shidduch, it looked impossible. But he went forward, because it was the right thing to do. And all of you are on the right path, even though you may have difficulty with your families, difficulty with your friends, thinking that you may have flipped out or whatever. You stick with it, and Hashem Yisborach helps. And he helps you do things that are even beyond your capabilities. There's a very interesting quote from Rav Wolbe, Zechariah Levracha. He gives a revolutionary definition of what a gadol is. What's a gadol b'Yisrael? So you think, person knows Shas and knows Poskim. One of the greatest lamdanim of the generation. Rav Wolbe said a gadol is a person that uses all his potential to the fullest. That was the Rosh Yeshiva. He had a mission in front of him. He had a job to do, to spread Torah, and to build families, tens of thousands of families. And he didn't waste a second. He was laser focused on what had to be done. And all of us can learn from that very, very much. Let's use our abilities to the fullest. Let's try to follow in his footsteps. As the Rav pointed out last night, the Rosh Yeshiva was a man of many, many talents. He was very, very exceptional in so many areas. A leader, complete leadership abilities, guidance, setting a role for all of us here. A Bal Seichel. He was so logical. How he approached everything. He let Seichel guide him in everything he did. He was so well read. He was such a master of the English language. I remember when I was a Baruch in Yeshiva, we would sit in the shmuzim and we didn't understand what he was saying. He was using words that we weren't even familiar with. And I always thought I was an intellectual. I went to a top school and my parents were a professor and a dean, and I figured that, and the mastery of the English language, of literature, he wrote, he was a writer, and, something close to heart, he was also a top athlete. He was everything. He could have done anything he wanted in life. He could have been a titan in business. He could have been the first Jewish president. He could have done anything. Tremendous, tremendous talent. And he gave everything to Hashem. There was a mission. He saw the mission. He saw what he had to do. He gave everything to Kodesh Baruch Hu. All those abilities were there to help establish this great yeshiva that you're all benefiting from. You're all his Talmidim. You're all his children. And he gave everything he had so that you could become the Ben Torah that you're hopefully going to become. And again, that idea of becoming a Gadol, he used every ounce of his strength to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and hopefully we can do the same. There's a very interesting medrash. And the medrash says that at the end of the Torah, Lo kam b'Yisrael navi k'Moshe Oid. There was never another prophet like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest prophet that ever lived. And the medrash says, Aval ba'umas ha'olam kam. Among the nations of the world, there was a prophet that was as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. Who was he? Bilam. Bilam was a prophet as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. Now this is very problematic. I mean, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos that Bilam was a Rasha. Is Bilam a Rasha? He's always referred to as Bilam a Rasha. Yeah, the Gemara talks about how evil he was and all the horrible things he did. How could it be that Bilam was on the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu? The Medrash says that Bilam saw everything Moshe Rabbeinu saw. So what's the pshat in this? Maril Diskin explains over here that Bilam saw everything Moshe Rabbeinu saw. He saw great visions. He knew Das Elyon. He knew when the Rebbeinu Shalom gets angry every day. He had all kinds of hidden knowledge. The difference between Bilam and Moshe Rabbeinu was that Bilam's nevuah stayed up here. Bilam's nevuah stayed in his head. He was a great intellect. Nothing penetrated down below into his being. His body, his emotions were still full of evil. He had great ideas. He saw this amazing vision, but nothing penetrated. Nothing was absorbed inside of him. Moshe Rabbeinu, whatever he saw, became part of him. It penetrated down inside. They saw the same thing. They saw the same vision. Bilam saw great things, but it didn't go inside. It didn't penetrate down. It didn't become at one with them. He had his intellect, and then he had his emotions, his Yetzaharas, and his animal drives, and everything else was completely disconnected from what was in his seichel. The whole idea of being a great Jew is that what we know up here should penetrate down into our leiv, into our hearts, into our bodies, and into our actions. That is really what being a frum Jew is about. Is that what we know is what we do. And that's a lifetime of work. And that also symbolized who the Rosh Yeshiva was. What the Rosh Yeshiva had in his head what he believed in, what his ideals were. That's what he did. That's where his emotions followed his seichel. They were subservient to the seichel, which means that the person is really one. He's really unified. He's really one being. And that's obviously a very high madrega. That's obviously something we want to strive for our whole lives, that we should follow our seichel, and that our actions and that our emotions follow the seichel. But that's what we're aiming for. And I was thinking that could be the beshert, that could be why, here we are reading all the parshas now about the Mishkan. We just read Parshas Truma, Tetzaveh, the Big Day Kahuna. We're going to have the Yakel Pekudei, which also deals with the Mishkan. What was this idea of the Mishkan? So there's many levels that the Mishkan could be understood. But one level, Chazal, they describe the Mishkan as a tzavar, as a neck. It's an interesting thing. Whoa, a Mishkan, neck, what's the kesher? Why are they connected? The neck is the part of the body that connects the intellect with the emotions. And the Mishkan was a way of bringing the ruchnius of this world, the spirituality of this world, the seichel of this world, down into the world to provide a home for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was a way of bringing all these lofty ideals that we have and bringing them down into the world. Like a neck is the connection between the intellectual and the regesh and the emotional. And so we saw that in the Rosh Yeshiva. Zecher Tzach Livrocha. What he said was what he did. What he believed was how he acted and how he felt, and his emotions followed the seichel. Now, that's obviously a very gifted and very high level. So how do we start getting there? That's why we have Limud HaMusar. Limud HaMusar is to bring the intellect down into the heart, into the being. And Mi'etz Hashem, that will help us to emulate the Rosh Yeshiva. Also, it's very interesting that we're going through this whole mourning period right before Purim. It seems the hefech, mourning, Purim. How do those two things fit together? Because we think of Purim, we think of frivolity, we think of the drinking and the wine and the costumes, and how does that fit with thinking about a Rosh Yeshiva and the loss that we have? So there's a thing that's missing very often when we look at the Purim story. We look at the Purim story and we see the miracles, hidden miracles. Hashem's name is not even mentioned in the Megillah. We see miracles, great miracles took place to our people, and we celebrate L'hoidois L'halel. We celebrate this wonderful 2 days of Purim, this year 3 days of Purim. And we lose track of the fact that there was a monumental change in the Jewish people over that Chag during Purim. The Jews went to the Suda of Achashverosh and they participated. Food was kosher. Everything was kosher. And there they were celebrating the downfall of Jewish people. They brought out the Kalim from the base of Mikdash, and they were celebrating the fact, you see, the Jews are finished. But the food was kosher, and they were afraid of the king, and so they all went, and they joined in the Suda. And because of the decree of Haman, the Gemara says that because Achashverosh handed the ring over to Haman, it achieved more than all the Nevi'im. All the Nevi'im that chastised the Jewish people, the handing over of that ring achieved even more than all of the prophets chastising the Jewish people and saying, do tshuva. That's what anti-Semitism is about. The anti-Semitism is about is to help us to do tshuva. That's why it exists. That's why we have no beds in the yeshiva, Baruch Hashem. Because when there's anti-Semitism, that brings tshuva. That brings tshuva. And Achashverosh handing over the ring to Haman, giving him the authority to go and attack the Jewish people, that achieved more than all the prophets getting up and telling the people to do tshuva. We did tshuva. Not only we did tshuva, we had a massive tshuva. We accepted the Torah out of love. On Shavuos, we accepted the Torah out of fear. On Purim, we accepted the Torah out of love. It was a massive tshuva. We did a massive tshuva on Purim. So what more fitting than the king of tshuva? the person who brought more tshuva than anyone, that we should be in the midst of thinking about him as we prepare for Purim. He brought more tshuva, more homes, more Torah homes. This institution has had influence beyond imagination what this institution has achieved. And it's all about tshuva. And that's what the Rosh Yeshiva brought to the world. And that's the Chag of Purim. I think it's very tzugapas, as we say, that this is the time that he left us. The Gemara says a fascinating thing in Yuma, Gedola tshuva, greatest tshuva shemivia geula le'olam. Greatest tshuva because tshuva brings redemption to the world. Why? We know it does. I mean, we see Parashat Nestavim. There's all talks about tshuva, and right afterwards it talks about the geula. So Maharal says a fascinating idea over here. He says tshuva is the natural person. You're not becoming something new. You're going back to what you really are. You think you're becoming something new, frum and Yiddishkeit. No, you're really going back to your essence. That's what tshuva is, return. You're going back to who you really are. And when a person goes back to his natural state, he goes back to who he really is, the world goes back to its natural state, which is redemption. What the Rebbeinu Shalom wants, Hamas holding our hostages and the UN making decrees against us, and anti-Semitism and all the difficulties. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants Geula. He wants us to be redeemed. He wants us to be back in Eretz Yisrael with the Beis HaMikdash. We go back to our natural selves, and the world goes back to its natural state. I'd just like to ask Mechila for myself, on behalf of all the Rebbeim, all the Talmidim. We had a great man in our midst, and he held himself so humble that sometimes we may not have given the appropriate kavod for who he was. And I asked Mechila for myself, from all the Rebbeim, from all the Talmidim. And then he should daven for us in Shemayim. Should be a Melitz Yosher. We are Yisoimim now. We're without our leader. We're without our role model. And all of us are kind of scratching around trying to figure out how to keep the legacy going. You should daven for us. We should have siyata d'shmaya. Should keep this yeshiva strong. Keep building beautiful homes, tens of thousands more homes of Torah homes. Bila Hashem, Mavis l'netzach, Bila Mavis l'netzach, V'yamach Hashem, Tima mikol ponim.